Well, speaking of the budget, we've seen year after year the budget rely on bracket creep to fund a lot of these policies. Now the Teals say that that should be indexed to inflation. Is that something the Coalition will support?
Isn't that extraordinary that these same Teals that are now decrying the insidious effects of bracket creep were also the ones that supported an Albanese government to go back on its promise, a promise made 2 elections in a row, to go ahead with the original Stage 3 tax cuts, which would have eliminated bracket creep for around 90% of all Australians earning between $40,000 and $200,000 throughout their lifetime. So the Teals are fantastic at this. They say one thing and, do another.
Yeah.
The ultimate in hypocrisy.
Well, but
Let's
on the
face
substance
it, Laura,
of the policy, though,
if you vote
bracket
Teal,
creep is a problem.
Bracket creep is a problem, and relying on bracket creep is a problem. But unfortunately, the government has put the budget in such a dire situation now. We have deficits as far as the eye can see, and in fact those deficits have got worse. Last week I asked Katie Gallagher at Senate Estimates to show me where the budget had improved, where the budget bottom line had improved between the budget and MyEFO, because the underlying cash deficit, the underlying cash balance, the budget deficit had actually worsened between last year's May budget and the MyEFO update. And that's because Labor's just endless appetite to spend is making the budget situation worse. That has repercussions, economic repercussions for the private sector. It has economic repercussions for households and for businesses, which is why the coalition government, the coalition opposition, has been calling for fiscal restraint, responsibility in spending, a restoration of those budget guardrails that were always the rules by which we maintained a discipline that kept the budget under control, made sure that we had a tax to GDP ratio that meant that we weren't taxing aspiration out of society, and that spending didn't grow faster than the economy. That's not happening now.
But what about the indexing of income tax thresholds? Is it a good idea?
Well, we will go to the election with a policy, with a tax policy that I'm not going to announce on your show this morning. I'm terribly sorry about that,
Will you do
Laura,
something about bracket creep?
Guaranteed.
And are you considering that this is an option?
You can be guaranteed that a Dutton Coalition will deliver lower and simpler and fairer taxes, because we know that if you tax your population too much, you suck the aspiration out of society. It's one of the great drivers of productivity. Productivity under this government has tanked. We need to inject productivity back into our economy. This is one of the ways. There are plenty of others. That includes low energy prices. It includes things like industrial relations laws that work for both the employer and the employee. And most importantly, includes cutting red tape and regulation.
But on this policy
spending.
Specifically, are you open to considering it, or have you got other ideas?
I haven't seen the Teals policy. The Teals, they're not serious players. They're never in the room where decisions are made. They're great on the media, but they're never in the room where decisions are made.
We don't need to see the detail of it, but the indexing, it has been done before, not in Australia. Would it work? Would you consider it?
Well, I would like to see what the implications of that are for a budget that is increasingly in deficit for the next 10 years because of decisions that this Albanese government has made that are costing Australians more every single day.
Those so you're saying the budget actually needs
that inflation is higher
at the moment,
for longer,
as you see it, and you might have to maintain that.
Peter Dutton's been clear that we want to deliver tax relief to ordinary Australians, and we have announced tax policies, particularly for small businesses. But right now, those great big substantial tax reform measures that the Teals call for but have no power to ever deliver, they simply can't be delivered and maintain that fiscal discipline, that budget repair at the same time. That will be our aim. Of course, we want more people to keep more of what they earn. That's how you inject aspiration back into the economy. But the most important thing we can do right now for all Australians is to repair that budget as quickly as possible and to make sure that we deliver prosperity into the future, not keep having governments that endlessly spend in a profligate way, costing Australians more.
Okay, let me quickly ask you about work from home, this announcement yesterday. This is seen in some quarters as an anti-women policy. Did you once support this work from home culture, and is it anti-women?
I think you must be reading from the Labor talking points. What a nonsense. I mean, let's face it, work from home is not a gendered policy in the first place. It's available, well, it's available to everybody, but it's also a very common sense proposal. If you accept a job with the Australian Public Service, I think the taxpayer that's funding that job would expect you to do that job from the office. Now, we're not banning work from home, far from it. If it works for the individual and their team and the department, well, that's fine. But at the moment, the CPSU, the Community and Public Service Union, and the Minister, Katie Gallagher, who, funnily enough, was put in her position by the CPSU, have agreed to an enterprise bargaining agreement that allows public servants the right to demand to work from home full-time. Now, that is not an efficient and effective way to deliver public services. We've heard stories about people working from home full-time, but in fact caravanning around Australia with their family. They're not even available to speak to on the phone most of the time. We've had stakeholders tell us that they've turned up to Canberra offices to meet with public servants, and they get into a meeting room and everybody comes in on the screen or dials in. There are actually no public servants in the building to take meetings with stakeholders that have flown to Canberra for the purpose. Now, we want an effective and efficient public service. This is not an unreasonable request. All existing arrangements will, of course, be honoured, but it's about culture. It's about understanding that a public servant's responsibility is to deliver for the taxpayer. It's not just about your personal productivity, it's also about your team's productivity and building the capability of the next generation who will look to their seniors for inspiration, for education and for information. If you're not in the room, well then how do you deliver that?
Jane Hume, always good to talk to you. Thanks so much.
You too, Laura. See you soon.